Ariana Grande is back. It's her first album in quite a few years now, after a few years break, which for a pop star might not sound a lot for most artists, but for a pop star I would say is quite a lot. Of course, her last album being Positions, which was an album I controversially ended up liking a little bit more than other people seem to. A lot of people seem to think it was one of her worst albums. I actually think it's up there with one of her better ones, to be honest with you. But even still, regardless of my thoughts on that album, I've always seen Ariana as a bit more of a singles artist anyway. I can list off so many singles I think are fantastic. You've got Greedy, you've got No Tears Left to Cry, you've got friggin' Positions, you've got Motive with Doja Cat, you've got Into You, you've got so many more that I think are absolutely fantastic and are some of the best of our generation, to be honest with you. But in terms of albums, never really seen Ariana as that kind of albums artist. Never really put one out that I've absolutely loved. She's got quite a few that I like, but never really had that one that I think, oh yeah, this right here is the one. But still, leading up to this one, there's been a little bit of drama, mostly the divorce, of course, that she went through, which only finalized last year. So a lot of this album is kind of touching on her feelings and thoughts in regards to that. But the other thing that happened was a little bit of a, okay, woo, Ariana potentially involved in some kind of home wrecking scandal, which I don't even know to this day is even true. But to be honest with you, if you want actual thoughts on that kind of thing, go to some gossip channel. I'm not here to give you my thoughts on that. It doesn't really have much link to the album itself, I wouldn't say. Maybe the track Yes And has maybe some link to it, possibly, maybe. I don't really know. Hard to say. I nearly just fell over for some reason. It's hard to really say. But even still, look, I don't think it has too much of a link to the album itself. Pop stars for generations now have been involved in tabloid drama and gossip and all this kind of stuff. Ariana Grande being involved in that kind of thing doesn't particularly surprise me if it's true or not. But at the end of the day, like I say, I don't really get involved in that kind of stuff. That's not what I do on this channel. If it's true or not, I don't really know. But does it surprise me that Ariana Grande, one of the biggest artists in the world, one of the biggest pop names in the world, is involved in some kind of scandal? No, because again, generations of years and years have passed of pop artists that have done exactly the same thing. Sometimes drama is fabricated in the run-up to albums to generate more buzz and hype. I'm not saying that's what happened here, but that's a thing that happens too. And yeah, I don't really have a great deal to say. So if you were hoping I was going to address all that in this review, I apologise, because that isn't what I'm going to do. I'm just here to tell you that I won't be addressing that. As for the album itself, it's once again a pretty decent Ariana Grande album. I mean, I probably could have told you this before I'd even heard it, because I just feel like every time I come out of an Ariana album, I'm like, yeah, cool, that's good, yeah, cool, yeah, cool. But yeah, otherwise, the Yes And single didn't really lead things up to the album very well, because obviously the track is totally different in how it sounds. So my first listen of the album was pretty jarring, because I was just waiting for the 3 or 4, 5 or 6 songs that were going to hit hard like that track does, and yet it's the only song that really does anything like that on the album, which does make me think, oh, was she doing this as a way to maybe address any drama? And it kind of got fast-tracked, and they just kind of were like, look, get in the studio, do something like this, do a kind of diva anthem, maybe talk about the haters a little bit, maybe talk about all the people that speak about you and be like, yeah, and what? Why you got to talk about me behind my back? Why do you care about whose PP I ride, and then drop it as a single? It's really hard to say, because it just doesn't fit the theme or the overall sound of the album at all. But again, a lead single, comeback, I guess you could call it, lead single, having this kind of diva edge to it, is again not really anything new in the pop world. And I think Ariana Grande probably just wanted her big moment that was like that, in a similar way to other artists in the past that have done similar things, like Taylor Swift doing Look What You Made Me Do as a lead single. I feel like every pop star has to have that moment in their career for some reason. I suppose it gets the people going, but like I say, as for the album itself, it doesn't really sound like this. It sounds pretty somber, it sounds pretty mellow at times. It's pretty catchy as well, don't get me wrong, but yeah, the sound of the album is very much more focused on an R&B sound at times, I would say, really. Opening track, of course, kind of talking about how you know, if the world ended, would you still be my lover? That kind of thing. Obviously, you know, very much emotionally drawn to being attached to someone, which is the entire kind of premise of this whole album, really, assumedly being about the person that she ended up divorcing. The weird thing about this track that I think, though, is that it sounds okay, it sounds fine, but then the lyrical theme of the song being about, you know, oh, if the world ended tomorrow, would you still be my lover, that kind of stuff, doesn't really match the next track, which is the track Bye. And then Bye itself is essentially like a breakup anthem, a sort of an empowering breakup anthem of finally realizing that you're just saying goodbye to the person who you once loved and calling it a day, and you're waiting for your friend outside to pick you up. I suppose that mismatch of emotions from these two tracks may just be where Ariana currently is at the moment in her own mind. But yeah, it definitely made me a bit like, how do these two tracks line up next to each other on the album? Because that just doesn't make sense to me. But as for the song Bye, I mean, I've already reacted to it on this channel. I think it's a great track. I think it's one of the best songs on this album. In fact, I think it is my favourite song on the whole thing, to be honest with you. Just those little funky guitar licks, the chorus is absolutely popping off. Ariana's vocals sound fantastic. The production is so lush. It's got that like classic Mariah Carey feel to it, who has obviously always been quite a big influence on Ariana anyway. You've got the kind of piano stabs that sound fantastic. It just, everything about it just feels so classic. It feels so enriched with sound. It feels so, I guess, in sort of indebted to the 90s, or maybe sort of like an homage to the 90s R&B world, where so many tracks sounded so lush and produced in this kind of way. Maybe late 90s, early 2000s actually. While we're on the topic of that, we may as well mention the track The Boy Is Mine as well, which is literally a track that interpolates a classic R&B hit from Brandy and Monica, The Boy Is Mine, which is the song that has the two girls fighting over the boy. And this track here by Ariana doesn't quite have that same narrative, although I think it would have been kind of funny if we'd seen Ariana collaborate with someone and do that, although it doesn't really fit the theme of the album, obviously, but I still would have liked to have seen that just for the comedy sake of it. But even still, this is a really well put together track. The production on tracks like these ones are just so enriched in how they sound. It's great. Not many of the tracks on this album stand out in the way that those two do, though. I mean, you've also got tracks like Don't Break Up Again, which is essentially sort of like the regret of breaking up with somebody. This one comes right after Bye. I think the sequencing of this one coming right after Bye makes a lot more sense than Bye coming after the first track, mind you. But still, of course, again, quite a mellow track, kind of just feeling like, you know, actually, I don't want to keep doing this. I do want to actually be with you, but you're conflicted with how you feel. We've got the track Eternal Sunshine as well, which is a literal reference to the film Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. On this track, she does a similar thing where she's talking about how she's wanting to wipe her mind and her memories of the relationship that she had with that person, because that's easier to her than having to live with the pain and all of the awful feelings that come with breaking up with somebody. I think it's a nice little cute way to, you know, put this song together, and it kind of goes to show how much she appreciates that film as well, which I think in an interview she said as well how much she does really like that film. So yeah, a clever way to put it into a song as well. And again, there's lots of tracks like this where it's just kind of like, you know, conflicting feelings about, you know, the breakup and having to deal with all those feelings. You've got the track We Can't Be Friends as well. Very relatable stuff. Every single track just seems to be, you know, something that everyone who's gone through a breakup would probably feel at any point in their life. And of course, the idea of trying to stay friends but not really making it work and that kind of thing. You know, Ariana isn't the most technically skilled writer in the world. If that's a controversial thing to say, then I would be very surprised, but I really don't see that at all. I don't think she's ever been the most detailed or I guess unique writer ever, but she does put these ideas down in a pretty simple way to make you fully understand it the minute you hear it, and they're pretty well written for the most part as well. Aside from Supernatural, where she talks about how this love is possessing me and it's like it's supernatural. which is just the most basic bitch thing ever, which probably someone will get tattooed because they love Ariana Grande and they don't see how basic bitch it is, but it's probably because they're also a basic bitch themselves. I'm sorry to hate on people. It's just such a terrible lyric on that song, man. There are a few moments as well where it's like, oh, for God's sake, Ariana, like, could you not have just rewrote this line or sat with it a bit longer and thought of a more creative way to write it? That's even if she's writing the songs, if you know what I mean. You've probably got some ghostwriters out there that are doing these songs, let's be honest. But still, some lyrics on this album do kind of just make me go, ugh. Eternal Sunshine, which I was just praising actually, does have the line, "Yet you played me like Atari," which is the most dated reference ever. Maybe Ariana doesn't play video games or anything like that, and that's fine, you don't have to. I don't play them that much myself, but everyone could at least recognize that Atari is like 40 years out of date now. Like, are you joking? Even still, I don't go to Ariana Grande albums expecting great lyrics, and if you do, we'll just leave that there. But I will say that it does drag some of the songs down, because we've heard breakup albums done before really well. There's so many artists out there that come through with incredible lyrics and incredible ways to write lyrics. You know, FK Twigs on the album Magdalene. You've even got Adele, who isn't the most amazing writer in the world. She's probably more about the vocals herself than anything else. But some of her songs in the past have been really well written and been about breakups. You've got Fiona Apple. Like, there's a lot to compare to, and you just kind of look and think Ariana, in terms of the writing, is quite a few levels below some of the all-time greats, let's be honest. But the sound of the songs generally sounds good. I mean, I've already mentioned We Can't Be Friends, which I mentioned about the lyrics, but the way the song sounds really good. I mean, it sounds like a classic Robin tune, which is really cool to hear. And it's actually doing really well in terms of the streams so far out of this album as well. So it's probably going to be the next big hit from the album, which is cool. And it is quite nice to hear a song that sounds like something Robin would have done on Dancing on My Own or Call Your Girlfriend, make it into the charts, because none of those songs ever really took off like that, and they're brilliant songs. You've got True Story, which sounds like something that The Weeknd would have put on Dawn FM. Like, it sounds like the song Is There Someone Else, which is a fantastic track, and I can't exactly pretend that I don't like this one, because if I like that track and it sounds like this, I gotta like both really, haven't I? But yeah, this is another good track, and again, musically and production wise, it just sounds really, really on point. Lots of good things about how this album sounds then, to be honest. I mean, like I say, Yes and is a track that I still really like. Don't really think the bridge is particularly that strong, but everything else about the song I think sounds really good. Particularly, obviously, the house-inspired instrumental, which sounds very much like Vogue by Madonna, which is a lot of people have already said. But again, sounds great. And yeah, I don't necessarily have any issues with how Ariana approaches songs in that kind of way. Just think sometimes her lyrics and her kind of blasé approach as well. I was talking to Rick the Lie, and he made a good point about how she kind of just sounds a bit disaffected sometimes. Like, she'll just sing so casually about really heartbreaking things, or what are supposed to be heartbreaking. But because she's kind of just casually going by the motions, some of these songs don't really sound that emotional when they could be really, really like heavy tear jerkers. And I don't necessarily think Ariana writes music or sings music that makes you feel that way. And I think some of these songs probably could have been a bit heavier with how they make you feel. And the last three songs as well are just like so empty sounding to me. Like, the album probably could have just ended at We Can't Be Friends, because those last three songs are just so forgettable. I know she's got, you know, a pretty important song to her on the last song with Nana featured, but I don't know, man. Apart from the fact that it's a nice thing that was probably important to Ariana, in terms of how it sounds, it's just like so in and out, like in one ear and out the other, basically, is what I'm trying to say. But yeah, overall, as with all her albums, they come with really great things, but they come with a lot of meh as well. And that's just kind of how I ended up feeling about this one, which is interesting, because going into it, I expected something very different to what we ended up getting. But still, I think overall, it's a solid 6 out of 10 album, as I felt similarly with some of the other ones too. There's just usually those really standout heavy hitters, those great tracks, but then you kind of get into it a little bit more and you read the lyrics and you see Ariana's writing. It kind of all ends up just being okay. That's how I feel anyway. Let me know your thoughts in the comments if you agree with me or disagree, if you think it's better than 6, or if you disagree with any particular things I've said, or you agree with any particular things I've said. As always, let me know. I think this review might have been a little bit sporadic and all over the place, but maybe matches some of the themes on this album too. I don't know. Maybe that's a little bit of a reach, but let me know your thoughts regardless. Check out my Patreon as well. Support me over on there if you're interested. Let me know what I should review next. Subscribe. Have a good day and goodbye.